The Omega was a mistake. Alpha King Damon Wycliffe said it with the calm voice men used when they wanted a room to believe their hearts had never existed. Avery Callahan stopped outside the Moonridge Council Hall with a walnut box of scent records pressed against her ribs, and for one stupid second, her mate Bond forgot how to breathe. Inside the chamber, 19-pack elders sat under the glass ceiling while rain ran down the windows like the palace itself was trying not to look. Damon stood at the head of the black stone table, tall, controlled, dressed in a charcoal suit that made him look less like a king and more like a verdict. Lady Marinvale sat 2 chairs from him. Perfect blonde hair, perfect pearl earrings, perfect little smile. Elder Corvin Hale leaned back with his silver cane across his knees. "Then you deny the bond?" Corvin asked. Avery should have walked in. She had proof in her hands. 3 sealed scent strips, 1 forged mating petition, and the trace of Corvin's cedar oil cologne all over a document he swore he had never touched. She had spent 11 nights in the archive proving someone was trying to trap Damon into a political match and make it look like pack tradition. She had skipped meals, ignored headaches, and let Vesper, Damon's royal black wolf, nap across the archive doorway like a dramatic rug with teeth. She had done all of that because Damon had looked at her once, just once, like she was not a low-rank Omega in a gray cardigan and rain boots. Like she was the only honest thing left in a palace full of polished lies. Now his answer came sharp and clean. "There is no bond worth discussing." The walnut box slipped half an inch in her arms. Not enough to fall. Avery had been poor too long to drop useful things just because her heart broke. From inside the hall came a low growl. "Vesper." Even through the carved door, Avery felt the wolf's fury roll down the bond like thunder over a mountain road. Damon must have commanded him still, because the growl cut off so suddenly it felt cruel. "Useful," Damon added, and his voice did not crack. That is all she was. Somewhere behind Avery, a young guard looked away so fast his armor clicked. So he had heard too. Wonderful. Public humiliation with witnesses. Very royal. Very efficient. Avery stared at the door handle. Her fingers were cold, but her mind went strangely calm. She could walk in and save him. She could hand over the evidence, let the council study it, let Damon keep his throne and his perfect stone face. Instead, she turned. She walked down the west stairs, past the portraits of dead Alpha Kings, past servants who knew better than to ask why an Omega's scent had gone flat with pain. At the archive, she placed her silver badge on the desk, opened the evidence box, and removed only one thing. The scent strip with Corvin's name hidden inside the lie. By dawn, Avery Callahan was gone. On her desk, beneath the badge, she left one sentence written in blue ink. Mistakes are easier to erase when they leave on their own. By 6 in the morning, Moonridge Palace discovered that losing one quiet Omega could break more systems than a failed power grid. The archive vault would not open because Avery Callahan was the only person who remembered that the old lock needed to be turned left twice, then tapped once with the corner of the key. The royal nursery sent 3 messages because a wolf pup named Button refused breakfast and had bitten a silk pillow with deep personal commitment. The laundry staff found 7 formal cloaks labeled wrong, which should not have mattered, except one of them belonged to a visiting boarder Alpha who considered navy blue an insult. And outside Avery's empty room, Vesper lay across the threshold like a black-furred lawsuit. No guard wanted to move him. Several had families. Damon Wycliffe stood at the end of the hallway in a dark shirt, no tie, no crown pin, looking as if the night had taken him apart and put him back together with worse instructions. "Move," he ordered. Vesper opened one amber eye and did absolutely nothing. High Beta Grant Mercer coughed into his fist. "Your Majesty, with respect, I believe he heard you." Damon did not look at him. "Then he can obey." Vesper placed one massive paw over Avery's abandoned slipper. Grant looked at the ceiling, possibly asking the old gods for patience or a transfer. Damon stepped closer to the door. The mate bond pulled hard behind his ribs, sharp and hollow, like reaching for a railing that was no longer there. Last night, he had told himself Avery would understand. She was practical. She was brilliant. She knew how council traps worked. She would hear the coldness, see the strategy, and forgive the wound because the wound had been useful. That was the kind of lie only a king could afford to tell himself. The room smelled faintly of rain, paper, peppermint tea, and Avery's fading cedar warm scent. Her bed was made. Her gray cardigan was gone. Her boots were gone. Her notebooks were gone. She had not fled in panic. She had packed with the careful efficiency of a woman who had spent years learning not to leave anything behind for people who might use it against her. On the desk sat her silver Omega badge and the note. Damon read it once. Then again. His jaw tightened so hard Grant looked genuinely concerned for his teeth. She took 1 cent strip, Grant said gently from the doorway. Damon turned. Which one? The one tied to Elder Corvin. The hallway went colder. Downstairs, the council bells began to ring for emergency session. Perfect timing. Corvin always did enjoy theater when someone else paid for the candles. Lady Marin appeared at the far end of the corridor in cream wool, her expression arranged into sympathy so neat it almost looked expensive. Your Majesty, she said softly. The council is asking whether Miss Callahan's disappearance confirms instability in the bond. Vesper rose before Damon could answer. The wolf walked past Marin, stopped at the top of the stairs, and dropped Avery's slipper directly onto the polished marble in front of 19 approaching elders. The palace went silent. Damon looked at Corvin, who had just arrived with his silver cane and a face full of careful concern. For the first time since midnight, the Alpha King smiled. It was not warm. It was worse. Find out who searched her room, Damon said. And lock the archive. Grant nodded. Already done. Good. Damon picked up Avery's badge, closed his hand around it, and felt the bond twist like it was still trying to point him toward her. Then we stop pretending this is about a missing employee. 11 days before Avery Callahan disappeared, Damon Wycliffe had summoned her to the royal wing because his bedroom smelled like another woman. That was how Grant phrased it, with the haunted courage of a man who knew the sentence might get him reassigned to counting fence posts along the Canadian border. Damon had been standing beside the open window in shirt sleeves, every lamp in the room turned low, his expression carved from winter and bad news. Say that again, he said. Grant cleared his throat. The scent trail indicates Lady Marin was here after midnight. Avery, who had been kneeling beside the rug with a brass scent case, did not look up. No, it does not. Both men turned to her. She touched 2 gloved fingers to the edge of the rug, then to the silver latch on Damon's writing desk. Her gift did not work like magic in old fairy tales. It worked like memory caught in fabric, oil, wood, and breath. Most people left pieces of themselves everywhere and never wondered who might be able to read the mess. Lady Marin's scent is on the surface, Avery said. Too clean. Too pretty. Like someone sprayed expensive perfume over a gas leak and hoped nobody owned a nose. Grant made a small sound that wanted to be a laugh and chose survival instead. Damon crossed the room. The air changed when he came close. Heavier, sharper, carrying cedar, cold rain, and alpha pressure held on a tight leash. Avery's Omega instincts suggested lowering her eyes. Her common sense suggested finishing the job. She chose common sense. Someone planted it, she said. Damon watched her hands. Can you prove that? Not if you breathe down my neck like a disappointed weather system. The silence after that was immediate and historic. Grant found a bookshelf very interesting. Vesper, lying near the fireplace, lifted his great black head and gave one amused huff. Damon did not smile, but something near his mouth lost the war by about 1/16 of an inch. Continue, Miss Callahan. Avery opened her scent case and removed 3 strips of white cotton sealed in glass. The real trail starts at the council corridor, not the royal wing. Whoever carried Marin's scent used old cloth, not skin contact. They passed the archive stairs, touched your desk latch, then left through the service hall. She paused, pressing her thumb to the latch where the memory burned colder. There is cedar oil underneath it. Grant's face changed. Elder Corvin wears cedar oil. Half the palace wears cedar oil, Damon said. Because Corvin made it fashionable, Avery replied. Powerful men love inventing trends that make their alibis smell crowded. This time Grant did laugh, just once, then looked prepared to deny it under oath. Damon studied Avery as if she had become a locked door he had not expected to respect. Why would Corvin risk this? Avery finally looked up. Because if he can prove you have already let a noble woman into your private rooms, he can push a political bond. If you refuse, he calls your judgment unstable. If you accept, he owns the queen's chair without ever sitting in it. Vesper stood then and crossed the room, silent for something nearly the size of a motorcycle. He lowered his head to Avery's shoulder and stayed there. Damon went very still. The bond had not snapped into words yet, but Avery felt something answer inside her, warm and terrifying. Damon felt it too. She saw it in the way his hand stopped halfway to the desk. For once, the Alpha King had no command ready. Then the council bell rang downstairs, and the palace remembered how to lie. By the next afternoon, Damon Wycliffe had turned the royal study into a war room, which was impressive because the royal study already looked like a room where Joy went to fill out paperwork. Maps covered the long table. Scent strips sat in numbered glass tubes. Grant Mercer stood near the fireplace with 3 folders, 2 coffees, and the expression of a man who had accepted that breakfast was now a theory. Avery Callahan stood at the far end of the table, sleeves pushed to her elbows, reading the memory off a broken wax seal, while Vesper slept against her boots like a loyal bodyguard who weighed more than a refrigerator. Corvin touched this after it was sealed, she said. Damon looked up. You are certain? Avery gave him a flat look. Your Majesty, people lie. Wax is terrible at it. Grant muttered. I may put that on the palace stationery. Damon should have found none of this amusing. Elder Corvin Hale had served 3 kings, controlled half the council votes, and knew exactly which old laws could turn a strong alpha into a ceremonial decoration. If Corvin proved Damon had chosen Lady Marin through a private scent claim, the noble houses would force a political bond before the next full moon. If Damon refused, they would argue his wolf was unstable and demand a regency. It was clean. It was legal. It was poison-wearing cufflinks. Avery placed the wax seal down and rubbed her wrist, where the mate bond had been humming all morning like a wire under tension. Damon noticed because he noticed everything except the things that mattered soon enough. Does it hurt? He asked quietly. Only when kings stand there acting like they are furniture. Grant turned toward the windows with heroic speed. Damon walked around the table, stopping a respectful distance away. The word respectful felt new between them, fragile but real. You should not be pulled into this. Avery smiled once, not happily. I was pulled in when someone used my archive to forge your future. That is not what I mean. I know what you mean. She met his eyes then. You mean I am low enough to be targeted and useful enough to be dangerous. The truth landed hard. Damon had no soft answer ready. His father had once trusted a mate bond more than the council, and the council had used that love to split the kingdom for 9 bitter months. Damon had inherited the throne at 27 with blood on the border roads and elders smiling like knives. He had learned early that affection gave enemies a door. Then Avery had walked into his palace wearing a gray cardigan, carrying scent cotton in a lunchbox, and somehow every locked room inside him had started opening. The council bell rang before he could speak. Corvin had called an emergency session. 20 minutes later, Damon stood before the elders while Avery waited outside with the final evidence box. Corvin tapped his silver cane once. Your Majesty, there are rumors about the Archive Omega. Damon felt Vesper rise behind him. He felt Avery beyond the door, close enough for the bond to reach. Corvin smiled. Is she important to you? There it was. The trap, polished and waiting. If Damon said yes, Avery became a political weapon. If he said no, he cut the bond in front of every elder who wanted to watch him bleed without showing blood. Damon chose the crown. Worse, he chose it with a steady voice. She was useful. Nothing more. Vesper growled, deep and furious. Damon forced him still with an alpha command that tasted like ash the moment it left him. Outside the door, the mate bond went silent. Not broken. Worse. Quiet. Damon continued speaking because kings were trained to stand upright while they ruined themselves. The Omega was an error in judgment. Corvin's smile widened. Damon knew then that he had not saved Avery. He had handed her the one wound no enemy could have reached without him. Avery Callahan did not run from Moonridge Palace. Running was for people who expected someone to chase them before breakfast. Avery had spent 6 years working in royal archives, which meant she knew every servant corridor, every old courier door, and exactly which guards got distracted by gas station coffee at 4 in the morning. She returned to her room with the mate bond gone quiet inside her chest, quiet in the awful way a house sounded after everyone had left. Her hands did not shake until she folded the gray cardigan Damon had once noticed. He had said, very seriously, that the left sleeve had ink on it. Avery had answered that some people collected medals, and some people survived budget cuts. He had almost smiled. She put the cardigan in her bag anyway, because grief did not get to decide what was practical. In the archive, she took the scent strip tied to Elder Corvin and left the rest arranged where Grant Mercer would find it if he was half as tired and twice as smart as he looked. Then she placed her silver Omega badge on the desk. The metal clicked softly against the wood. It sounded much too small for a goodbye. At the West Courier door, old Mrs. Alvarez from the kitchen caught her with a paper sack. "I did not see you," the woman said. Avery looked inside. 2 turkey sandwiches, a thermos of coffee, and a slice of apple pie wrapped in foil. Her throat tightened. "You are very bad at not seeing things." Mrs. Alvarez sniffed. "I have worked for kings for 30 years. Being selectively blind is a professional skill." Avery left through the rain before kindness could make her weak. She walked 1 mile through the service road, caught a produce truck headed toward the lower valley, then changed clothes in a 24-hour laundromat beside a highway where the vending machines sold breath mints, laundry soap, and one lonely packet of beef jerky nobody trusted. She rubbed cedar ash along her coat cuffs to blur her trail. By noon, she reached the neutral border town of Hollow Creek, a place with 2 stoplights, 1 diner, and a werewolf clinic that advertised flea shots, sent trauma care, and free coffee that should have been illegal. The clinic owner, Dr. June Holloway, looked at Avery's soaked boots, pale face, and tightly held bag. "Pack trouble?" Avery asked. "Is there any other kind?" June handed her a towel. "You can start with the kennels. Nobody asks questions there except the husky mix, and he is judgmental with everyone." For 3 days, Avery cleaned cages, calmed anxious wolf pups, and slept in a room above the clinic that smelled like antiseptic, old blankets, and microwave popcorn. At night, the bond ached like a bruise she refused to press. She did not check the news. She did not say Damon's name. On the 4th morning, rain tapped against the clinic windows, and every animal inside went suddenly silent. Avery opened the front door. Vesper lay on the concrete step, soaked black fur plastered to his sides, amber eyes exhausted and furious. Tied around his neck was a torn strip of Damon's dark coat. Avery stared at him. "You walked 3 counties to guilt-trip me?" Vesper thumped his tail once, then dropped a silver cuff link at her feet. Elder Corvin's cedar oil rose from it like a confession. Avery did not touch the cuff link right away. That was the first rule of scent memory. Never read a confession before coffee unless you wanted your whole day to file a complaint. Vesper, however, had crossed 3 counties in freezing rain and clearly had no respect for emotional pacing. He nudged the silver cuff link across the clinic floor with his nose, then looked at Avery like a judge with pause. Dr. June Holloway leaned out from the back room, holding a bag of kibble. "Is that the royal wolf on my welcome mat?" Avery picked up a towel. "No." June stared at the enormous black wolf dripping on the floor. "That is a very confident no. It is a temporary no." Avery knelt beside Vesper and pressed the towel against his soaked fur. He had a shallow cut near one paw, nothing serious, but enough to make her chest tighten before she gave herself permission. "You are an idiot," she told him softly. Vesper thumped his tail once, offended but not sorry. She treated his paw, gave him water, then finally lifted the cuff link between 2 fingers. Corvin's cedar oil clung to the silver, but underneath it was something sharper. Archived dust, sealing wax, and fear hidden under expensive manners. The clinic faded. Avery saw Moonridge in fragments. Corvin standing at her desk after midnight. Corvin opening the evidence box. Corvin smiling as he replaced 1 scent strip with another. Then his voice, low and pleased. "By tomorrow, the council will believe the king's wolf drove the Omega out. An unstable alpha cannot rule." Avery came back to herself with her hand clenched so tight the cuff link pressed a crescent into her palm. June's face had lost all humor. "That bad?" Avery swallowed. "Worse. He is going to use me as proof Damon should lose the throne." Vesper gave a low rumble. "Do not start," Avery said. "I am still mad at your human." The bell over the clinic door rang before Vesper could express his legal opinion. Every animal in the building went quiet again. Damon Wycliffe stepped inside wearing a black coat, road dust on his boots, and the face of a man who had rehearsed 12 speeches and trusted none of them. Grant Mercer came in behind him carrying 2 gas station coffees and the spiritual exhaustion of a man who had driven behind an alpha king for 6 hours. Damon's eyes found Avery first. Not the wolf. Not the cufflink. Her. The mate bond stirred, careful and aching, like it was afraid to be noticed. Avery stood. She did not bow. Your Majesty. Damon flinched, just a little. Good. Some words deserve to land. Miss Callahan, he said, voice rougher than she remembered. I came to apologize. Then you should know I charge extra for royal emergencies. Grant whispered, fair policy. Damon did not look away from her. You heard what I said. You did not hear why. Avery laughed once, quiet and tired. That is the problem with breaking something, Damon. The reason does not sweep up the glass. For a moment, he looked less like a king than a man standing outside a door he had locked from the wrong side. You are right. That stopped her more than any excuse could have. Damon stepped back instead of closer. I thought denying you would protect you. It protected my pride better. Vesper huffed, brutally approving. Avery held up the cufflink. Corvin is preparing to accuse you of losing control of your wolf. He wants the council to believe I ran because I was afraid. Damon's expression went cold, but this time the cold was not for her. Will you come back? Avery met his eyes. Not as your hidden mistake. Not as your shield. And not if you plan to speak for me again. Damon lowered his head once. Not a command. Not a performance. Then come back as the witness who ends him. Avery looked down at Vesper, who had already sat beside her, clearly deciding the matter for everyone. I hate this family, she muttered. Grant sipped his coffee. That is the most reasonable thing anyone has said all week. The ride back to Moonridge should have felt like surrender. Instead, Avery decided somewhere around mile 42, between a closed bait shop and a billboard for Maple Donuts, that it felt more like walking into a bad meeting with better shoes. Damon drove the lead truck himself, which made Grant visibly nervous and made Vesper deeply judgmental from the back seat. The Royal Wolf had taken up most of the leather bench, one paw resting on Avery's duffel bag like he had personally packed it. Damon glanced at the rearview mirror. He usually rides in the second vehicle. Avery looked at Vesper, who was shedding black fur on what was probably custom upholstery. He usually has better judgment than the rest of you. Grant coughed into his coffee. Damon accepted that without argument, which was new enough to make the silence feel strange. By the time the palace towers appeared through the late afternoon fog, the North Hollow news feeds had already turned ugly. Corvin had moved fast. Every pack radio station and border bulletin carried the same polished rumor. Alpha King Damon Wycliffe's wolf had frightened a low-rank Omega into fleeing, proving instability in the royal bond line. The words sounded official, which was how lies dressed when they wanted old men to believe them. At the palace gate, guards straightened. Then they saw Avery in the passenger seat and forgot what their faces were supposed to do. One young guard actually saluted the truck, the wolf, Damon, and Avery in 4 separate panic motions. That boy needs a chair, Avery said. Damon parked beneath the stone arch. He needs better training. He needs a workplace that does not turn one missing archivist into a constitutional crisis. Grant opened his door. In fairness, we are very good at overachieving. Inside, the palace smelled like beeswax, wet wool, and fear hiding under expensive flowers. Servants paused in corridors. Some looked relieved. Some looked guilty. The noble guests looked disappointed that Avery had returned alive, calm, and wearing a thrift store coat from Hollow Creek instead of shame. Lady Marin waited near the grand staircase in pale blue, hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Miss Callahan, she said, I did not know Corvin meant to use your name this way. Avery stopped. But you knew the scent trail was false. Marin's mouth trembled once, then steadied. I suspected. That is a comfortable word. Yes, Marin whispered. It was. Damon's jaw shifted, but he said nothing. Avery noticed. So did Vesper, who gave a satisfied huff and leaned against her leg hard enough to nearly move her 2 inches. The council doors opened at the end of the hall. Elder Corvin stood beneath the carved moon crest, silver cane in hand, looking wounded in the careful way of men who had written the script themselves. Miss Callahan, he called, loud enough for every witness to hear. North Hollow is relieved you are safe. We have many questions about why you abandoned your post after compromising the king's judgment. Avery felt the mate bond pull, Damon's anger burning through it like heat behind glass. He took 1 step forward. She lifted 2 fingers. He stopped. The entire corridor noticed. Avery walked past him, past Marin, past the staring guards, with Vesper at her side, carrying Corvin's cuff link in his mouth like the least polite evidence bag in history. "Good," Avery said. "I brought answers." The Great Hall of Moonridge Palace had been designed for coronations, treaties, and the kind of speeches that made people stand straighter while quietly wishing for lunch. That evening, it held 19 council elders, 6 noble houses, 50 pack witnesses, half the royal guard, and one low-rank Omega walking down the center aisle with a black wolf at her side and no visible interest in being polite. Elder Corvin Hale stood beneath the moon crest, silver cane planted before him like he had personally invented dignity. "Miss Callahan," he said, his voice carrying cleanly through the hall, "before we begin, you should understand the seriousness of your actions. You abandoned a royal post, removed archive evidence, and fled after causing distress to the Alpha King's wolf." Vesper stopped. Slowly, with excellent timing and very little respect for government, he opened his mouth and dropped Corvin's cuff link onto the marble floor. The small silver piece clicked once, twice. Then it spun to a stop in front of the council table. A few servants leaned sideways to see better. Grant Mercer looked like he wanted to frame the moment and hang it in his office. Corvin smiled thinly. "A misplaced cuff link proves nothing." "Good," Avery said. "Then you will not mind if I explain where it has been." She lifted it with a cotton cloth and set it beside 3 glass scent tubes. Her voice stayed even, but inside her chest the mate bond pulled toward Damon like a bruise remembering the hand that made it. Damon stood near the throne, silent, shoulders squared, face pale with restraint. He did not interrupt. That mattered more than she wanted it to. Avery touched the first scent tube. This was taken from the royal study 11 days ago. Lady Marin's scent was planted over an older trail, but underneath it was cedar oil, sealing wax, and archive dust. Corvin gave a soft laugh. "Many people enter the archive. Not after midnight using an elder's master key." The hall shifted. Avery placed a copied entry log on the table. "Your key opened the west archive door at 12:43 in the morning." Corvin's eyes hardened. "Logs can be altered." "Yes," Avery said. "That is why you altered mine." She opened the second tube. "You replaced my original record with a false strip claiming Damon's wolf drove me out of the palace. But you forgot something." She looked down at Vesper. "Royal wolves do not care about paperwork." Vesper stepped forward and pressed one paw onto the cuff link. The pack bond in the hall answered, low and electric. Every wolf present felt it. Vesper's memory of Corvin in Avery's room, Corvin's hand in the evidence box, Corvin's voice saying the council would believe an unstable alpha could not rule. Lady Marin went white. "I heard him discuss the petition," she said suddenly. Corvin turned on her. "Be silent." Damon moved at last. Not fast, not loud, just one step, and the whole hall remembered whose house they were standing in. "No," Damon said. "She will speak." Marin's voice shook, but she did. She admitted the political bond had been staged, that her family had been promised influence, that Corvin had planned to use Avery's disappearance to force a regency vote. Corvin's face lost its careful sorrow. "This kingdom needs stability," he snapped. "Not an alpha led around by a lowborn Omega and a sentimental animal." The insult landed. Damon took another step, but Avery lifted 2 fingers again. He stopped. A murmur passed through the hall, sharp with disbelief. Avery turned to the council. "You called me dangerous because I could read what powerful people try to hide. You called him unstable because his wolf refused to lie. Maybe the problem was never the bond. Maybe the problem was a room full of leaders more comfortable with forged order than an ugly truth." Silence spread all the way to the back doors. Then Damon walked to the center of the hall and faced her, not the council. "I called you useful because I was afraid choosing you would cost me the throne," he said, voice rough but clear. "I was wrong. The mistake was thinking the throne was worth more than the truth." He took the silver Omega badge from his pocket and held it out with both hands. Not as a command, not as a reward, as something he had no right to keep. Vesper nudged Avery's elbow, shameless as always. Avery looked at the badge, then at Damon. "This does not fix it." "I know," he said. Behind them, Grant ordered the guards to take Corvin's council seal. The old elder did not fight. Men like Corvin rarely did when the room stopped believing them. Avery accepted the badge, but she did not pin it on. Not yet. And that, more than anything, made the Alpha King lower his eyes. 3 weeks after Elder Corvin Hale lost his council seal, Moonridge Palace still smelled faintly of beeswax, winter rain, and people pretending reform had been their idea all along. Avery Callahan returned to the archive on a Monday morning, not because Damon Wycliffe asked, and not because the mate bond pulled at her every time she passed the royal stairs, but because the records belonged to the pack, and she was tired of powerful men treating truth like furniture they could move when guests came over. Her silver Omega badge sat in her desk drawer for 6 days before she pinned it back on. Not over her heart. Lower, near the pocket where she kept cotton scent strips and peppermint gum. When Grant Mercer noticed, he said, "That placement feels political." Avery stamped a file. "Everything in this palace is political. Even the soup." Grant considered that. Especially the soup. Damon did not laugh from the doorway, but his mouth came dangerously close. He had changed in quiet ways first. He stopped sending guards to summon Avery and started walking down to the archive himself, carrying his own folders like a man discovering manual labor at 34. He created an Omega advocate seat and sent trials. He removed noble control from archive access. He made Royal Wolf memory admissible in council hearings, which caused 3 elders to object and Vesper to sneeze directly into the ceremonial ink. History would record the reform. Avery would remember the sneeze. Still, forgiveness did not arrive like a crown placed neatly on someone's head. It came slowly, in ordinary pieces. Damon asking before entering her office. Damon listening when she said no. Damon standing silent while Avery corrected an elder who called her the King's Omega instead of Miss Callahan. The first time it happened, the hall went cold. The elder swallowed. Damon only said, "Use her name." Not loud, not angry, just final. That mattered. Not because Avery needed a king to defend her dignity, but because an Alpha King was responsible for the room he allowed around him. Power was not proven by how many people lowered their eyes. It was proven by who could stand upright in its presence. On the first clear night after the reforms passed, Avery found Damon on the West Terrace, looking over the pack lands, city lights glittering below like someone had spilled stars across the valley. Vesper lay between them, pretending not to listen with the subtlety of a school bus. Damon held out a mug of coffee. Peppermint. 2 sugars. No royal apology hidden in it. Avery took it. Growth. Painful, apparently. They stood there a while. The bond between them was still tender in places, not broken, not healed beyond memory. Just honest. Damon looked toward the dark tree line. "I thought loyalty meant the pack obeying the throne." Avery followed his gaze. "That is fear with better manners." He nodded once. "I know that now." She looked at him then, really looked. Not at the Alpha King, not at the throne, not at the man who had wounded her in a room full of wolves. At the man trying, every day, to become worthy of the power he already held. Loyalty is when people can tell you the truth and still believe they are safe afterward, she said. Damon's eyes lowered, not in shame this time, but respect. "Then I have work to do." "Yes," Avery said. "You do." Vesper chose that moment to stand, grab the hem of Damon's coat in his teeth, and drag him 2 feet closer to Avery before sitting down with the satisfied weight of destiny and terrible manners. Avery stared at the wolf. Damon closed his eyes. He believes he is helping. He is making a policy recommendation. For the first time in weeks, Avery smiled without it hurting. Damon saw it, and did not reach for more than he had earned. That was the beginning of trust coming back, not as thunder, not as a grand vow, but as a quiet door left open. Moonridge would remember the scandal as the night in Omega proved an elder lied. The pack would remember the reforms. But Avery would remember something simpler. The day an Alpha King learned that love without respect was possession, loyalty without truth was obedience, and a throne that could not bear an Omega's dignity was never strong enough to protect a pack in the first place.